Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. When I thought about what video to film this morning, Sunday, I realized that I'd never done an April TBR video. And for those of you who might not be familiar with my TBRs, I film videos where TBR means to be released. So each month I look at the new releases and pick a couple that I personally find interesting, and then I share them with you. But I never did that for April. It's now April, let me check, 19th. So I'm over 2 weeks late. But fortunately, most of the books that I picked for April that I personally find interesting are to be published towards the end of the month, with the exception of one. So I thought, it's late, but I filmed the video anyway. And as always, we start the TBR with general fiction. And if you following me, you're probably not surprised by my pick because Ottessa Moschweg has a new novel coming out 2 days from now, 21st of April, Death at Her Hands. Ottessa Moschweg is a young, at least from my perspective, a young Boston writer. And I really loved her debut novel, Eileen, and I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation at the end of last year, and I really enjoyed that too. So I'm excited for her new book. I think Moschweg is not a writer for everyone, but in my book, that's a good thing. And for me, she is one of the most inventive, and she has her really own voice, story-wise and writing-wise. So I love her. Anyway, Death at Her Hand, or Death in Her Hand, I think it's rather called. Yes, Death in Her Hands. I should get the title right when I talk about a new book that I'm excited about. Anyway, Death in Her Hands is about a 72-year-old woman who lives in a remote a cabin sort of thing with her dog Charlie. And one day when she has her walk through the forest, she finds a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper is written, her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body. There's no dead body, though, just the scrap of paper. And then the story takes off from there. Our protagonist starts to investigate, but knowing Ottessa Moschweg, I don't expect a sort of Miss Marple story. I think the protagonist has probably problems of her own, but I thought the premise sounded interesting, and like I said, it's Ottessa Moschweg, so I want to read that book. Next, we move on to translated fiction. I have two works of translated fiction for you this month, or for us this month. And the first one is indeed the only book that already has been published on the 7th of April. And that is a Japanese book, Miko Kawakami. I'm looking down so that I get the name right. Miko Kawakami, Breasts and Eggs. And it has been translated from the Japanese by Sam Batt and David Boyd. Miko Kawakami was born in 1976, and she is regarded as one of the most promising younger Japanese writer, and I have never read anything by her. The book Breasts and Eggs is the expansion of a novella published earlier with the same title, and you have an female narrator, her older sister, and the sister's daughter. And the sister has problems coming to terms with her changing body as she gets older, but also after giving birth, and she wants breast enhancement. So it's a story. The first part, this expanded novella thing, is a story about the female body and how the body is pictured in society, and what is expected from women with regards to their body. And then in the novel, there is a second part 10 years later, where, especially if I understand it correctly, the theme of aging is explored in more detail. It sounds interesting. I want to read more Asian literature. You know that if you're following my channel. I have never read anything by this author, so I thought this must go on the April TBR. The second book in the category translated fiction is from France, and that's Muriel Barbary, A Strange Country, translated from the French by Alison Anderson, and it will be published next Friday on the 24th. Um, Muriel Barbary is obviously a French author and a philosophy professor, and I've only read one book by her, The Elegance of the Hedgehog. It was published, I think, over 10 years ago, but I read it like 2 or 3 years ago, and I really enjoyed it. So when I saw that she has a new novel translated into English, I was interested. I have to say the novel tells me, or the blurb tells me, that this is a sequel to an earlier novel, The Life of Elves, which I haven't read, but that shouldn't be a problem because it's not a series. Anyway, so this novel is set in Spain, and we have two officers. It's during the war, or a war, and we have two young officers in a army compound cellar, and all of a sudden they are visited by this strange figure who is called Petrus, or Petrus, and they follow him, and then he shows them a different world, and it sounds a little bit fairy tale-esque, which I don't know, because I normally don't like it, but it's Muriel Barbary, so I'm interested anyway to pick up this book. And if you have read The Life of Elves, then maybe you have even more reason to pick this one up. Next, we move on to nonfiction. We should all try to read more nonfiction, particularly me. So for the April TBR, I picked up history book about history by Catherine Sharp Lundeck, The Women with Silver Wings, which also will be published next week on the 21st of April. Catherine Landeck is a history professor in Texas, and in this book she explores the history of the women in the Air Force, in the American Air Force during World War II. When after Pearl Harbor, there was the Air Force asked female pilots to come forward, help train their male counterparts. 100 women answered this call, and even though they were not allowed as women to fly combat, but they trained the fighter pilots. As you know, I'm always interested in the forgotten history of certain, female explorers or female scientists, or, like the book Hidden Figures about female mathematicians in the NASA. So when I saw this book, I was immediately interested. If I'm not, that much interested in all the Air Force thing, but the fact that there were women, I didn't even know that there were women in the American Air Force training pilots. So that immediately captured me, and it sounds riveting. Next up is crime fiction. I always love myself a good crime novel, and this one is a debut novel, so I'm even more interested because, as you know, I try also every year, every month, not every year, every month, to at least read one or two debut novels if possible. And this one is Take Me Apart by young Californian author Sarah Sliger, and it will be published towards the end of the month. Sarah Sliger is an academic. She teaches English in California, and her debut novel is the premise is there was this famous photographer, Miranda Brand, and she mysteriously all of a sudden died, or not mysteriously, I mean, she died under mysterious circumstances on the height of her career. Move forward a couple of decades, and that's the core of the book, as I understood it. Miranda's son Theo asks the ex-journalist Kate to not to investigate, that's not true, to archive his mother's work. And in the course of that work to archive, Kate also, discovers diaries, and she starts to investigate the death of this famous photographer, and she has dark secrets of her own, of course, and then the action hopefully takes off from there. It sounds interesting, it sounds promising, it sounds fresh in a way, always with the debut, of course, like, by the way, with all the books that I present here, I haven't read them, so I never know whether they're good. But with the debut in particular, it's always, you have to wait whether this will be an author that really can make something. I'm babbling here. I find it interesting. It's crime fiction. So here we go. It goes on the TBR. And as always, we end the TBR video with sci-fi. And for April, I picked out a book, the new book by Laura Lamb, Goldilocks. Laura Lamb is an American writer who moved to Scotland, so she is now a resident in Scotland. And I've read previous books by her in the Pacifica series, and I wasn't blown away, but I liked it. It was good, fun entertainment. And this new book, Goldilocks, is set in a dystopian future. The Earth is on the verge of environmental, dear God, that's a difficult word, collapse. I'm not going to say that again. The Earth is on the verge of collapse, and there's a mission put together by an all-female crew, even though, as I understood, the rights of women are quite heavily curtailed in this society, but still there's a mission, a spaceship that is supposed to explore a planet in the Goldilocks zone, so in the habitable zone. And then this all-female crew is ripped or cheated out of their mission, and then the main character, Valerie, they steal the spaceship and go there anyway. Hey, exploring a new planet, an all-female crew, somebody stealing a spaceship, I'm all in for that. So Goldilocks came on the TBR as the science fiction pick for April. Oh, and the book will be published on the last day of the month, the 30th of April. So these were my belated books that will come out in April. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Looking forward, as always, to your comments, and I'll talk to you soon in the next one.